It's our time. We must rise up and no longer disparage. It's our time, church, to honor our heritage. We have a Savior. He gave it all on the cross. We stand beside martyrs who counted nothing as loss. They took God's mysteries, opened them up for us. Stephen, John the Baptist, Bonhoeffer, Jan Hus. Surrounded by a cloud of witnesses above, it's now our turn to model his unending love. Our mission is one we cannot confuse, nor muddy up with some trite excuse. You say you're not well-versed, ready, or able. I think Moses even tried to use that fable. The time we have, it's now more urgent. If we should hear, well done, faithful servant. Yeah, church, it's our time. It's our time to confess the ways we're mangled, the sins and selfishness that have us entangled. Lust, greed, and pride, their path leads to the grave. Yet we return to our sins as if we're a slave. Can we survive in this putrid Dead Sea? I quote Paul, may it never be. So let's cast aside our individual leprosy and begin to leave a biblical legacy. There's a glorious prize awaiting to be won, and the way to win is to start to run. Let's lace them up and fight the good fight, become to the world both salt and light. Our life on earth is merely a vapor. Our chapter must move from pen to paper. So church, let's get to writing because it's our time. It's our time, church. We have what it takes to help the world from its slumber awake. To Jesus, we are his beautiful bride. Whom shall we fear with him on our side? We have each other. We are not alone. It's iron to iron in the combat zone. There's a promise of life full of adventure. As long as we give both talents and treasure, the workers are few, the harvest is plenty, with so many lives running on empty. Scores of people trying to cope. They've come to the end of their proverbial rope. Young eyes are wandering, looking for direction. Make sure we point them to his resurrection. The clock's ticking. We're on our dime. Hey, church, rise up. It's our time.
Isn't that good? We've been watching that same bumper for 4 weeks. It's as good in week 4 as it was in week 1. It's time. I mean, if we just are honest about what's going on in our world, it's time for the church to rise up. If we are just honest about what's going on in our own city, the enormous number of needs and issues facing us as a society, it's time for the church to rise up and have a presence and a voice and do what it is that Christ invited us to do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. It's good to look out over the audience and see some faces, college students who are back for Thanksgiving. Sam and Caroline, good to see you. Is your mom making all your favorite meals for you, Sam? No? How big was the bag of laundry you brought home with you? Pretty big. Maddie, it's good to see you. How's it going up there? Diving? Good for you. Your mom's got a big smile on her face. She's glad you're home. Your dad, too. It's good to see all of you. Thanks for being here today. I don't know everybody in the room, but I know something about everybody in the room. Every one of us in this room today, we hate to be inconvenienced. We do not like to be inconvenienced. Or is that just me? I mean, whenever something doesn't go quite like we think it should, something doesn't work like we had hoped it would work, we get frustrated and we get impatient and we get angry and disappointed. And sometimes we say really rude things to complete strangers because we think that somehow they're responsible for inconveniencing us. And we as Americans, we're probably the worst. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but Americans do not like to be inconvenienced. You know why? It's because we're spoiled. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. We're spoiled because we live in a nation with so many systems, so many structures, so many services that exist just to make our life convenient, that when our life is inconvenienced, then we really react to that. Here's just a couple of examples. A flat tire or a dead battery in your car. And you come out and you're like, are you serious? I don't have time for this. I'm supposed to be at work in 20 minutes. I've got a meeting across town. I can't miss it. I can't believe my car's not working. All the money that I spent on this car, and it works 365 days a year for most years. And then there's this one day, and it's terribly inconvenient. How about this one? No Wi-Fi. Are you serious? I have emails that I have to send. I have social media that I need to surf. I can't do without Wi-Fi. This is so inconvenient. A computer that won't boot up quite as quickly as you think it should. It's so inconvenient. You're ready to get going and it's taking all of 30 seconds. Or you've worked on a document for an hour and you press the save button and you get that spinning wheel of death. And no matter what buttons you push, it just won't stop. And you know you're going to lose all that work. And you think, this is so frustrating. A little closer to home, anything happening on I-10. Lane closures, bridge closures, traffic lights blinking. So frustrating. Standstill traffic for an hour or more, and you think, this is so stinking inconvenient. You get pulled over because you were going too fast. And you think, I don't have time for this right now. I was speeding because I was in such a hurry to get to where I need to go. I don't have time for you to pull me over. This is going to take forever. I love this one. Your service person will be there between 10 and 3 o'clock. You're like, seriously? That's like my entire day. That's so inconvenient. How am I supposed to work my day, my kids, my job, everything? How am I supposed to, and be at home waiting for your guy to show up? Well, if it's going to work like that, can I pay my bill then between January and December? So inconvenient. Make a phone call, you're put on hold. You get a sales call or a telemarketer, phone your house while you're having dinner. This is so inconvenient. And then the classic, the ultimate inconvenience, you know what it is? You're at the grocery store. You're about 6 people back in the line. And the person at the counter pulls out a checkbook. And you're back in the line and you're like, oh my. It's like, what century is it? Who still uses a checkbook? But it doesn't just involve the checkbook now, does it? No, because now they need their glasses. Get their glasses on, and then they're fumbling around for a pen. And it's like, how much is it, sweetie? And fill the check out, and you're thinking, are you serious? This is so inconvenient. Anybody? Or again, is it just me? We do not like to be inconvenienced. So how in the world does that relate to our faith? Because when we truly understand our faith in Jesus Christ and the invitation to follow him, we have to have an understanding about inconvenience. As we've been talking throughout this whole series, we've been talking about Jesus' invitation to come follow me. Every person that Jesus met, he made this one invitation, come follow me, come follow me. And we've been talking about our response to that invitation. And what we've discovered is that how we respond to that invitation comes back to what we believe to be true about 3 things. What we believe to be true about the identity or the person of Jesus, what we believe to be true about his death on the cross, and what we believe to be true about the resurrection. Because if we don't really recognize Jesus to be God come to earth, if we don't really see the significance of the cross, of Jesus having to pay for the sins of the world, and if we don't believe that the resurrection happened, then when Jesus says, come follow me, we're not necessarily given to following him maybe in the ways that he would want. Because after all, who's Jesus? But if we truly believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he died on the cross to pay for the sins of the world, of which mine are included, to offer me eternal salvation, and that he resurrected from the dead, declaring that he is unlike any other human being that's ever lived, then if he asked me to do something, then I ought to be willing to do it. But it all comes down to what we believe to be true about Jesus. And so Jesus says this, follow me. Come on, follow me. There's some people that I'm going to move toward. Will you come with me toward these people? There's some places that I'm going to go, some places that I'm going to be found, places that I'm going to be. Will you come and be found in those places with me? Jesus says there's certain priorities that I'm going to govern my life by. Will you follow me in these priorities? There's some attitudes and virtues that I'm about. Will you come and develop these same attitudes and virtues? There's some habits that I'm given to. Will you develop those same habits, and will you pursue a same kind of lifestyle that I'm inviting you into? Will you follow me? And what we make of Jesus determines just how willing we are to pursue following him in any of these directions. Because the truth of the matter is that some of the people and some of the places, attitudes, priorities, virtues, that at times they're going to have implications on our life. And sometimes where Jesus is going and who he's asking us to serve and how he's asking us to live, it won't be applauded and affirmed by the people who live around us. Sometimes our own family, our peers at work, classmates, our neighbors, our friends, and just a society in general. They may not affirm and applaud what it is that Jesus is asking of us and the directions that he's asking us to go, and we may find ourselves very unpopular. So the question is, if it were unpopular to follow Jesus, would you anyway? Because of who you believe he is. Sometimes Jesus says, if you're going to follow me, you have to know it might be dangerous. There will be risk involved. There won't be some of the security and the safety that you prefer. There won't be some of the sanitation that you like. There'll be times that there isn't clean water to drink or safe food to have. There won't be hospitals nearby, or sometimes I may take you to places where politically or socially it's not safe to be there. But I'm going there and I'm inviting you to come with me. Will you anyway? We looked at this last week. Sometimes Jesus is going to ask you to follow him, and it's going to be costly. You're going to have to give up some things. You're going to have to surrender some things. Will you anyway? And then today, we're going to look at this topic of inconvenient. If it's inconvenient to follow Jesus, would you anyway? Now, we posed the question this way. If it were inconvenient to follow Jesus, would you anyway? But actually, the more I thought about it, that's not the right question. The right question is, when it is inconvenient to follow Jesus, will you anyways? When it is inconvenient to follow Jesus, will you anyways? Because the truth of the matter is, it will always be inconvenient to follow Jesus. If we truly understand the call of Jesus in our life, and we follow him in the directions, the places, the people, the attitudes, the values and priorities, the lifestyles and the habits that Jesus invites us to, it will always be inconvenient. And the reason that I'm telling you that up front is that if you're looking for a faith, if you're looking for someone to follow, and it's safe and clean and comfortable and it's never inconvenient, then you're not looking for Jesus. We're not talking about following Jesus. You may follow someone else that's more comfortable and convenient, but if you're going to truly follow Jesus Christ, there will be times that it's terribly inconvenient. Would you anyway? First of all, we have to understand inconvenience. Where does it come from? What makes something inconvenient? You want to know? I'm asking. Do you really want to know? What makes something inconvenient is expectations and preferences. You see, what we have to be honest about is the fact that we all have a set of expectations about everything. We all have certain preferences about everything. And when our expectations or our preferences aren't met, then we feel inconvenienced. We don't like it. We think it should be different. And so we fuss and we fume and we gripe and we complain and we whine and we get angry and we get disappointed and impatient because something isn't going exactly like we think it should. You see, all of us have expectations and preferences for how we think things should go, how we think things should be done, and how we think things should operate. And when they don't, it feels terribly inconvenient to us. So again, how does that work when we're talking about our faith? So it's interesting. Jesus was a rabbi. He wasn't the only rabbi. Probably would have been multiple rabbis that lived in the very city that Jesus lived in. But Jesus was a rabbi, and like any other rabbi in the first century, Jesus did something that all rabbis did. He invited a group of young men to come and be his followers, disciples, apprentices. Essentially, what a rabbi did was a rabbi had a certain theological, a certain spiritual perspective on life and how it was to be done. And so he'd invite disciples to come and learn this way of life, this way of faith from a rabbi. And Jesus invited 12 young men to come and be his disciples. And we see that just like any rabbi, there were times that he would teach in a very instructive, curriculum-driven kind of way. There was these things, the topics that Jesus would talk about. And then at times, Jesus would teach by illustration, by modeling something, by pointing something out in the world in which the disciples worked and moved. And a really, really good rabbi was really, really good at not only teaching content, but modeling for his disciples what it meant to live a life of faith. And so I want to draw your attention to two particular incidents where Jesus taught something and then one where he modeled something, because they're important to where we're headed today. Does that make sense? So in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus' disciples ask him, would you teach us how to pray? And it's interesting when Jesus responds to their question, will you teach us how to pray? He doesn't teach them anything about posture. He doesn't teach them anything about getting on their knees or raising their hands or standing or sitting. He doesn't teach them anything about when and where. He only teaches them essentially the essence of the heart and topic of prayer. And so he says this is then how you should pray. You should pray, our Father in heaven. So that's a start. That when you pray, you begin to approach God as though he's your Father. Loving, kind, compassionate, caring. He exists to protect and provide for you. That is his nature. He's a father. And you come to him as your Father in heaven, meaning he's unlike any other father you've ever known on this earth. If your father was lousy, God is the exception. He's a heavenly Father. He's different. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. It's hallowed. You know how important this is to me. It's not hallowed. Don't say hallowed here at Cibolo, okay, please? It's not hallowed. It's hallowed. It has to do with deep reverence and respect. I come to my Father who is in heaven with a deep respect for who and what he is. He's the God of the universe. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Wait a second. So evidently our Father that's in heaven, who is hallowed by his holiness and his otherness, is evidently a king. And he has a kingdom. Your kingdom come, your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. This is the beginning of the prayer. And when you pray, you come to your Father in heaven, who happens to be a king, the king of the universe. And you come with a very deep and profound respect for who he is. And you ask him this, Father, I'm praying that your kingdom would come down here to this earth and that your will would be done on earth, just like I'm positive that your will is always done in heaven. And how does that work? That works by you and I living our lives, doing God's will so that his kingdom comes to earth in the places where we live. Did you follow that? So we learn a simple principle. To be a follower of Jesus Christ is to choose to submit yourself to the rule of God in your life. It's to come up under the kingdom of God and live your life in response to it. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Now, here's another illustration or incident from the life of Jesus that's very instructive for his disciples. It was almost time for the Passover feast, and Jesus knew that it was time for him to leave this world, go back to his Father, where? In heaven. He had always loved those who were his own in the world, and he loved them all the way to the end. So whatever we're about to witness has something to do with how Jesus loves. Did you get that? You understand that? So during the meal, Jesus stood up and he took off his outer clothing, and taking a towel, he wrapped it around his waist. Then he poured water into a bowl and he began to wash the followers' feet, or the disciples' feet, then drying them with the towel that was wrapped around his waist. And when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his outer clothes and he sat down again where? At the head of the table where the rabbi sits. And then he asked his disciples, hey guys, do you understand what I just did for you? Did you get that? You call me rabbi, you call me Lord, as though you believe that I am truly God come to this earth. You call me these things, and you are right because that's what I am. Well, if I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, then you also should wash each other's feet. I did this as an example so that you should do as I have done for you. Come follow me. These are things that I do. If you wish to follow me, then you'll do those too. I tell you the truth. I love it when Jesus says that. It's not because he's been lying. I tell you the truth. He's saying this is really important. Like, pay attention to what I'm about to say. I tell you the truth, a servant is not greater than his master. And a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him. So if you call me teacher and Lord, you need to understand that you're not going to somehow be exempt from the things that I do. And then he says this, so if you understand these things about me, you'll be blessed if you live your life this way, if you do these things. So Jesus is modeling for his disciples and then teaching them the fact that if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to learn to serve others. It's the way that I am, and it's where I'm headed, and I'm asking you to go there with me. Now, the issue wasn't so much that we in the 21st century are being instructed to literally wash each other's feet. That was unique to the culture and the time that Jesus is doing this particular act. But the principle is that I will always be going in the direction, I'll always be going in the direction of serving others. And if you wish to follow me, you'll have to go there too, because you're not going to be greater than me as your master. Does that make sense? So, all of that to set the stage for this. I want to talk about 5 reasons why it will always be inconvenient to follow Jesus. 5 reasons why it's always going to be inconvenient. Again, if you're looking for a convenient faith, we're not talking about following Jesus, because it's always inconvenient to follow Jesus. I'm going to give you 5 reasons. Now, I need to say something before we look at the 5 reasons. Each of the 5 reasons could be a series of messages in and of themselves. I could spend weeks just talking about each one. I don't have the time to do that. We'll do that another time. So all I'm going to be able to do is very quickly overview each of the 5 reasons. That makes sense? And I encourage you. You can study them on your own. You can look them up and research them yourself. You can get with members of your community group or your life group or another group of friends, and you could talk about and study about these things yourselves. But I'm just going to be able to hit the highlights. Does that make sense? So the 5 reasons why it will always be inconvenient to follow Jesus. The first is what I call the conflict of kingdoms. The second, the calling of Christ. The third, the priority of people. The fourth, the nature of love. And the fifth, the struggle of self. 5 reasons why it'll always be inconvenient to follow Jesus. And let me talk about them really quickly. Conflict of kingdoms. If you listen to the teachings of Jesus and you read about his life all through the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, you're going to understand very quickly that Jesus always talked about the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. He was always pointing people to the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven. And one thing that he made crystal clear is that if you wish to enter into the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, you enter it only by faith. You're not going to see a throne. You're not going to see a crown. You're not going to see a person sitting on a throne. You're not going to see some big celestial kingdom. This is a kingdom that is accessed by faith. It's what you believe to be true. And Jesus is inviting people into his kingdom to live by faith. Now, what is that? It's to live by faith under the rule of God in your life. It's interesting. We don't live in a kingdom. We don't understand that. That's not how our government is arranged. But in the first century, that's really all that existed. Were different kingdoms. And anytime you talk about a kingdom, you talk about 3 things. You talk about rule, not rules, just a way that it's governed. You talk about a ruler, the king, the one who's in charge, and you talk about the ruled, the subjects, the people who are a part of this kingdom that live under the rule of the ruler. So Jesus is inviting people into the kingdom of God where there's a certain way that God governs. There's a certain way that God asks his subjects to live their life, and God is this benevolent, kind, compassionate, forgiving, gracious king. And we live under the safety of this king, and we welcome being ruled by him because we know that it is good and best and right. There's just one problem. You know what it is? We're Texans. And we don't like anybody telling us what to do. We don't like anybody being in charge of us other than us. We don't want anybody else's agenda, anybody else's priorities, anybody else's values, because we have our own kingdom. We have a way that we like to do things, the way we want to live our lives. And so eventually, in following Jesus, there's going to be a clash of these 2 kingdoms, the kingdom of God and your kingdom, my kingdom. And they're going to clash. And when they clash, guess what? It's going to be terribly inconvenient because the kingdom of God is going to invite us to live one way, and that might not be comfortable and convenient to the way that we prefer. And we always live in the tension of these 2 kingdoms. That's why it's always inconvenient to follow Jesus. Secondly, the calling of Christ. You can't look at the life of Jesus and study it honestly that you don't see that the premier example of what it is to live our lives like Jesus is to be a servant. Over and over and over again, Jesus invites people, come follow me. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn to live the way that a servant lives, humble and compassionate and generous and gracious, willing to do whatever it takes to help another person we're going to serve. Jesus said, the first shall be last, and the last, the servant, will be first in my kingdom because my kingdom is based on a completely different set of values. The greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus declared, is who? The servant of all. So if we're going to follow Jesus, his calling is to come and learn from me on how to be a servant. Well, where's the problem with that? Well, we're not very good at being servants. We prefer to be served. That's why we invite somebody else to mow our lawn for us, or to come in and clean our house for us, or somebody else to do the taxes and the stuff we don't like to do. Why? We like to be served because that makes our lives more convenient. And Jesus says, oh, yeah, see, this is going to be a problem because I'm inviting you to be a servant to others, and at times it will be terribly inconvenient. The single most prominent expression of following Jesus is being a servant to others, and serving by nature is inconvenient. That's the name of the game. Third, the priority of people. Again, if you study the life of Jesus, what you're going to find is there was nothing more important to Jesus than people. Living, breathing human beings with all sorts of different experiences and backgrounds and stories. And Jesus said, there's nothing in all of the world that's more important than people. Nothing is or ever will be more important to Jesus than people. Not your programs, not your to-do lists, not your agenda. People will always be more important. And people at times can be messy. And people at times can be hurting and broken and dysfunctional. And people at times can be annoying and awkward and unreasonable and ornery. And so if we're going to follow Jesus in the priority of people, at times some of the people that Jesus is going to invite us to serve won't be our kind of people. Jesus says, yeah, see, we got to work on that. And so it's going to be inconvenient at times that in loving people, the way that Jesus invites us to love them and to serve them, it's going to be inconvenient. The next one, the nature of love. If we study the theme of love from Genesis to Revelation, what we see is that true love is defined by the scriptures. True love by nature is all about self-sacrifice. The definition of true love is that I inconvenience myself for the good of another person, that I set aside my ambitions, my agenda, my preference, if it means that I can serve another person for their need. Just the nature of love and how Jesus modeled it and how God taught it to us. The nature of love is that it's inconvenient if we're going to truly do it the way that Jesus invites us to. And then finally, the struggle of self. You see, we read through the life of Jesus and we see that it's all about love and it's all about the priority of people. We read through the story of our life, and it's not always about that, is it? Or is that just me? That if we listen to ourselves long enough, our story sounds like this. Hey, it's my time, my priorities, my energy, my money, my talents. It's my food, I bought it. My clothes, they're mine. My lifestyle, my home, my stuff. It's my life. It's my time. I'm going to do with it what I want to do with it because I only have a little bit of it. I'm not going to give it away to some other people. We're really, really touchy about this one. It's my money. I made it. I went to school all those years, and I've worked hard in this company for all those years. It's my money. My talents. I'm not going to just give them away for free. My food. I might let you have it if I'm inviting you, but keep your hands off of it unless I'm sharing it with you. Jesus says, here, come follow me. Here, look, downtown San Antonio, there's some people living here on the streets. They don't have enough clothes. But you have like a closet full of them. In fact, you have a closet full of them, and then you have all these plastic bins that you trade them in and out for the seasons. And there's a lot of these clothes in your closet that you haven't worn in a year. And you're going to hang on to them? Meanwhile, there's a guy on the street, a woman on the street, some kids on the street that don't have? I'm going here. Will you follow me? No, it's my stuff. My stuff. And then we have a clash of kingdoms. Does this make sense? 5 reasons why it will always be inconvenient to follow Jesus. The conflict of kingdoms, the calling of Christ, the priority of people, the nature of love, and the struggle of self. Are you listening? Listen to me. At the center of the human soul is a throne. Every one of you has one. At the center of the human soul is a throne. The question is, who or what sits on that throne? In your life, who or what sits on that throne? Is it your career? The truth of the matter is your career calls all the shots, establishes all the priorities. Your career is what your life rotates around, and everything else is distributed accordingly. Your career, which, if we're thorough, it's your boss. Your boss calls the shots. He sits on the throne. She sits on the throne and declares how you're going to go living your life. You say, I'm one step ahead of you, preacher. I own the company. Yeah. So you're now the boss. You're the one that sits on the throne. For some people, it's their financial portfolio. It's how they arrange their life to continue to accumulate more and more financial resources to be able to live the life that they prefer. So money sits on the throne. Can we be really honest? Can we? Sometimes kids, your children, they sit on the throne. You end up living your entire life making sure that your kids get all the attention, all the energy, all the money, all the priority. Even if it means that you don't follow Jesus and the things that were priorities to him. Sometimes it's just us. We just sit on the throne and we go, I'm so smart and I'm so experienced and I'm so wise. I got to figure it out. Thanks, Jesus. I got it from here. And you sit on your throne. But if you want to follow Jesus and you want to enter into the kingdom of God, you must step off that throne or take off anything that is not Jesus. No exceptions. And who sits on the throne determines a lot about how all of this is experienced. You see, if you sit on the throne or anybody or anything else, then you'll always live in this conflict and you'll always move in the direction of what's most convenient for you. If you sit on the throne, then you're not necessarily given to truly becoming a servant to others because you're going to always demand that you be served. In your marriage, in your friendships, in your job. If you sit on the throne, the priority of people, that's negotiable. Because ultimately, you'll always be the highest priority. If you sit on the throne, the nature of love will be, I'll love others as it benefits me. And in the struggle of self, if you sit on the throne, it'll always be your time, your energy, your talents, your money, your house, your cars, your vacations. But here's the difference. If you put Jesus on the throne, all of this changes. If you put Jesus on the throne, then your heart's desire is, I want to do whatever it is that God has asked me to do. I want to live under his rule. I am truly praying that his kingdom come and that his will would be done right here on this earth through me as he sees best. If Jesus sits on the throne, then I just want to be like Jesus. And I'll serve anybody, anytime, any way that he asks. If he sits on the throne, then I will begin to see all people like Jesus sees them. If he sits on the throne, then I will truly come to understand that the best expression of love is the one that's self-sacrificial, and I give myself away for the good of another. If Jesus sits on the throne, then I'm not interested in self anymore. I'm interested in what best honors and glorifies Jesus in my life. Does that make sense? The question is, who sits on the throne? And so it's so interesting as you read the New Testament that this whole issue of the throne is ultimately decided on two factors: what you make of Jesus' death on the cross and what you make of his resurrection. Those two factors determine everything about who sits on the throne. And so all through the New Testament, we keep coming back to the cross. The cross is so critical to this issue of the throne. Romans chapter 5, verse 8, God demonstrates his love for us in this, that while we were still a mess in our sin, Christ gave his life as a servant for the redemption of us. He gave his life for us. He died. 1 John, dear friends, let us love one another because this is what comes from God. You know, God's at work and present when love is at work and present. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God by nature is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and his only Son into the world that we might live through him, and that came through the cross and the resurrection. This is love. Not that we loved God. We weren't the ones that initiated this, but he loved us, and he sent his Son as a satisfactory sacrifice for the evil and malicious negative impact of our sin. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we then in response, we ought to love one another. This is how we know what love is. Jesus laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a person in need, but you can't even resurrect some pity for them, then how in the world can the love of God be in that person? The answer is it can't be. Dear children, let us love with let us not love with words or speech. Let's not go wah, 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 wah. Let's talk about it, but let's do it with actions and in truth. Why do we keep reading about the importance of the cross in the New Testament? It's because this, while the gift of salvation is free, it's not cheap. The free gift of salvation came at great cost to God in the brutal death of his Son, Jesus Christ, on the cross. So if you're looking for a convenient salvation, you still don't understand the enormous inconvenience required to provide it for you. Make sense? So all month here in November, as we've worked our way through this series, we've been offering you opportunities to stretch faith muscles. Maybe step outside of your comfort zone and do some things that maybe you've never done before. In response to each of these messages, and many of you responded in such admirable ways. First week, we invited you to join us for a barbecue that was happening in downtown San Antonio with many of our Muslim friends who are refugees here in our own backyard. 40 of you showed up to help visit, be a part of that event, and I thank every one of you for doing that. We invited you to consider our commitment to the Ministry of Mercy Orphanage in Nigeria, home to some 300 children, that we've committed to now for many years to make sure that they always have the money for enough food to eat, medical care, education. And we invited you to help us replenish that particular fund. To date, $14,000 has been donated, but that'll only get us through 2 quarters next year. So we continue to invite you to stretch your faith muscles and act on this opportunity. You can stop by our website and find out how to participate. We invited you to consider a family missions project that's coming up next July. At present, 7 families have stepped forward and said, I'd like to serve. I'd like to take my kids to a mission field and teach and model for them what it is to follow Jesus in some places that might be uncomfortable and inconvenient. So God's at work. There's so many other ways that we can all step forward and follow Jesus into that next step. So I want to invite you to the next one, another one. This coming Thursday, as we have now for years, we host Thanksgiving here at our church campus for the kids of Meadowlands. Kids who have had a really hard time in life because the big people in their life, their parents, grandparents, did such a lousy job taking responsibility for being parents. And these kids have been protected by the state, and they don't have a family for Thanksgiving, so we've been their family. Right now, about 37 of us have committed to being there this coming Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, to provide a Thanksgiving experience for these kids. But you know what? We need 65 people. Kind of trade in and out throughout the day. Just to have lunch with them, just to play some games with them, just to get to know their names and hear a little bit about what it is to be a friend to them. It's just an opportunity. It's a way to stretch. But I'll tell you this, because you're thinking it, and I'm just thinking out loud, is it'll be inconvenient. It's Thanksgiving. It's your holiday. You got friends and family in town, and you're making a big to-do about what's on the menu, but it'll be inconvenient to leave your house and come up here and do something to help some other people. Would you anyway? That's the question. Would you anyway? Make sense? I'll tell you a story as we leave. So I'm preparing to run my second marathon. Not because I enjoy running, but because I've set my sights on a much larger goal that I hope to accomplish, and I have to learn to run marathons to get there. So about 2 weeks ago, my training session called for me to do a 20-mile run. I don't like running much at all. So I started out, big plans, high hopes. I got to about mile 10, and the wheels started coming off, and I hopped on the struggle bus, and my body was whining and complaining and griping. I got to mile 11, the furthest point of the course that I was having to run that day. Mile 11 was the parking lot of the firehouse just up here on Ralph Fair Road. I pulled over there and stopped my watch and got some food in me and drank some stuff, water. And I was just trying to get my head together. My body was belly aching, and I didn't want to go any further, and I still had 9 miles to go. I was like, I did not want to be there. So I'm standing in the parking lot. I got my hands on my knees, and this thought hits me that if I turn right out of this parking lot, I could be home in about 10 minutes. I'd just go right up Ralph Fair Road, and I'd be home. And that'd be so much easier, so much more convenient. But if I turned left, then I was essentially recommitting to cover all the ground that I had just already covered. And it was going to take 2 more hours. Talk about a conflict of kingdoms. Back and forth. But I decided that something was important to me. And so I turned left. And I started down that long road of a lot more miles before I could get home. Some of you made a decision to follow Jesus maybe recently or maybe years ago. And maybe it's tough. Maybe you found yourself the unpopular one. Or you found it to be incredibly expensive socially, physically, spiritually, financially. Or it's become really inconvenient. There's just so many other things that you prefer to do that seem just to work better for you. And Jesus is asking you to follow him. And he's saying, I know it's inconvenient. I know at times it's unpopular and it's costly, but would you anyway? Because it'll be worth it. The Apostle Paul writes to the early church, is one of my favorite verses. Cling to it. So, my dear brothers and sisters, stand strong. Stand strong when it's unpopular. Stand strong when it's inconvenient. Stand strong when it's expensive and dangerous. Don't let anything move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your work in the Lord is never, ever wasted. Jesus says, come follow me. It's worth it. It'll be inconvenient and dangerous and expensive and at times unpopular. But would you anyway? Make sense? I ask you to stand together. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, my prayer is that you will find a growing community of men and women and students here at Cibolo Creek Community Church who will, by faith, surrender themselves to live under the rule of God in the kingdom of Christ. That you'll find a growing community of men and women and students who will believe so deeply that your Son Jesus was in fact God come to this earth, that his cross, death, was so important to the equations of life, and that his resurrection decided everything. That no matter what your Son Jesus asked us to do, we would do it anyway. This is our prayer. Guide us there, I pray and ask in Christ's name. Amen. All right, gang. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.